Daptone Studios, Brooklyn. A 23-year-old woman from North London walked into this vintage recording space carrying more emotional baggage than most people accumulate in a lifetime. Amy Winehouse had already released one critically acclaimed album, but nobody was prepared for what was about to emerge from the wreckage of her personal life. Over the next few months, heartbreak, addiction, and raw talent would collide to create one of the most powerful albums in modern music history. This wasn't just a recording session. This was alchemy, the transformation of pure human suffering into art that would outlive everyone in that room. Amy had been spiraling since her relationship with Blake Fielder Civil imploded earlier that year. Blake wasn't just her boyfriend. He was her obsession, her muse, and her destruction all rolled into one toxic package. When he left her to return to his ex-girlfriend, Amy didn't just lose a relationship. She lost her sense of self, her stability, and her ability to function in the world without pharmaceutical assistance. But sometimes, the darkest periods of an artist's life produce their most transcendent work. The call to work with Mark Ronson came at exactly the right moment, though neither of them knew it at the time. Ronson was riding high on his reputation as a producer who could blend vintage sounds with contemporary sensibilities, but he had never worked with an artist whose personal chaos was so intimately connected to their creative process. Amy's management thought collaboration with Ronson might help channel her self-destructive energy into something productive. They had no idea they were about to witness the birth of a masterpiece. Their first meeting was electric with creative tension. Amy arrived at Ronson's studio in Camden looking like a 1960s girl group singer who had been through a blender. Her signature beehive slightly askew, eyeliner smudged from crying or drinking or both. She was carrying a notebook filled with fragments of songs, scattered thoughts about love and loss written in handwriting that got shakier as the pages progressed. Ronson later said he could feel the pain radiating from her before she even opened her mouth to sing. The creative process was unlike anything Ronson had experienced before. Amy didn't just write songs, she bled them. Every lyric came from a specific memory, a particular moment of betrayal or longing or rage that she could recall with photographic clarity. She would sit at the piano, her fingers finding chords that seemed to channel decades of soul music through her 23-year-old frame, and words would pour out of her that were too honest, too raw, too real for most people to handle. Back to Black, the title track that would become the album's centerpiece, was born from a conversation Amy had with her friend about going back to darker times after Blake's departure. The metaphor was perfect. The idea of returning to blackness, to depression, to the void that exists when love disappears. But Amy's genius was in making this deeply personal experience feel universal. Everyone who heard that song could remember their own moment of going back to black, their own descent into the darkness that follows lost love. The recording sessions became a form of therapy that was more effective and more dangerous than anything Amy could have found in a clinical setting. Each song required her to relive the trauma that inspired it, to inhabit the emotional space that had nearly destroyed her. Ronson watched her transform in front of the microphone, becoming possessed by the pain she was channeling into music. It was beautiful and terrifying to witness, like watching someone perform surgery on their own heart. Rehab, perhaps the most famous song from the album, came from Amy's very real resistance to entering treatment for her growing addictions. Her father and management were pressuring her to get help, but Amy saw Rehab as an admission of defeat, a surrender to the idea that she couldn't handle her own demons. The song was her rebellion against everyone who thought they knew what was best for her, but it was also a window into the psychological complexity of addiction. She wasn't just refusing treatment. She was asserting her right to self-destruction. Working with Amy required Ronson to become part producer, part psychiatrist, part emotional bodyguard. She would arrive at sessions in various states of intoxication or withdrawal, sometimes unable to remember lyrics she had written days before, other times so focused and brilliant that she could nail a vocal take that would give listeners chills years later. The inconsistency was maddening from a production standpoint. but it was also the source of the album's emotional authenticity. The musicians Ronson assembled for the sessions were veterans of the New York soul scene, players who understood that they weren't just backing a singer, they were participating in something that transcended normal recording protocol. They watched Amy pour her life into the microphone night after night, and they responded by playing with a level of empathy and sensitivity that elevated every track. This wasn't just professional collaboration, it was communal witnessing of an artist in the process of transformation. Love Is a Losing Game became another cornerstone of the album, a song that captured the exhausting cycle of loving someone who consistently hurts you. Amy's vocal performance on this track was devastating in its vulnerability. Every word delivered with the weight of lived experience. She wasn't singing about abstract concepts of heartbreak. She was documenting the specific ways that Blake had dismantled her sense of self, and somehow making that documentation beautiful. The production choices Ronson made were crucial to the album's impact. Instead of polishing Amy's raw performances, he preserved their imperfections, their humanity. You can hear her breathing. Between lines, the slight rasp in her voice that came from too many cigarettes and not enough sleep. These weren't flaws to be corrected. They were evidence of authenticity that no amount of studio trickery could replicate. As the album took shape, it became clear that something unprecedented was happening. Amy was creating music that sounded vintage but felt completely contemporary. Songs that referenced the great soul traditions while speaking directly to modern experiences of love, loss, and addiction. She was channeling Aretha Franklin and Etta James through her own North London sensibility, creating something that honored the past while defining the future of soul music. The emotional cost of creating Back to Black was enormous. Each recording session left Amy drained, sometimes barely able to function for days afterward. The process of transforming her pain into art was therapeutic, but also re-traumatizing, forcing her to relive experiences that were still too fresh, too painful, to process fully. Ronson often wondered if they were creating great art or enabling self-destruction, but Amy was determined to see the project through. Valerie, her cover of Steve Winwood's song, became another highlight of the album, demonstrating Amy's ability to take existing material and make it completely her own. Her interpretation wasn't just a cover. It was a reimagining that revealed emotional depths in the original that most people had never noticed. This was Amy's superpower, her ability to find the human truth in any song and amplify it through her own experience. When the recording was finally complete, everyone involved knew they had participated in something special, but nobody could have predicted the global impact Back to Black would have. The album was Amy's attempt to process her personal demons, but it became the soundtrack for anyone who had ever loved someone who was wrong for them, anyone who had chosen self-destruction over self-care, anyone who understood that sometimes going backward is the only way to move forward. The success of Back to Black was both Amy's greatest triumph and her heaviest burden. The album made her a global superstar, but it also trapped her in the very pain she had been trying to process through music. Audiences wanted her to be the broken, tragic figure they heard on the record, and Amy found herself unable to evolve beyond the persona that had made her famous. Looking back, Back to Black stands as a testament to the transformative power of artistic expression, but also as a warning about the cost of turning personal trauma into public entertainment. Amy Winehouse walked into Daptone Studios as a talented but troubled young woman, and emerged as one of the most important voices of her generation. The album she created from the wreckage of her relationship with Blake Fielder Civil became a masterpiece that would influence countless artists and touch millions of listeners. That 23-year-old woman from North London didn't just record an album in 2006. She alchemized her suffering into something eternal, proving that sometimes the most beautiful art comes from the most painful experiences. Back to Black became her gift to the world, a perfect crystallization of human vulnerability, transformed into transcendent music that continues to heal and hurt in equal measure.